Welcome to the Lights On podcast, featuring stories behind building and running successful hotel businesses. Let's get started.
Welcome back to the Lights On podcast. I'm Kin Siu, CEO of Lights On and your host today. On this podcast, we share stories across hospitality about building and growing hotel businesses. Before introducing our guest, Josh, today, a quick sponsor message by Lights On. Lights On is the revenue and marketing team for independent hotels. We work with over 40 hotels across the US, managing more than $85 million in annual revenues for our portfolio. Lights On fix the hidden problems that cost you revenue, such as room rates that don't move with demands, OTAs that outran your own website, or past guests that you never hear from again. We find these opportunities and help you put together a plan to boost your revenue. Recently, we just helped a 34-room Florida resort find $400,000 in just 6 weeks doing all these fixes. We also help a 13-unit Montana properties. In 5 months, their revenue just jumped 40% ahead of last year. If you want results like this, talk to us and learn more at lightson.co. Josh Graham, our guest today, Head of Market Development for North America at Cloudbeds. Josh started his hospitality career in the operational sides, from front desk to GMing to now senior leaderships across a few of the hospitality tech companies like TravelClick, Amadeus, and now Cloudbeds. Today, we're going to talk about what actually changes in the tech landscape for hospitality and what stubbornly stays the same. For independent hoteliers, now you got to see the other side of the industry from the tech provider perspective. Josh, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Kim. Pleasure.
Yeah. So I've been talking to lots of tech providers. They all came from the tech background, myself included, right? So I don't really talk to that many people who had an operational background first, then moving into the tech background. So I would love to just going back in history, how you got started in hospitality and what led you to move to the tech segment of hospitality.
Yeah, it's sort of a series of odd coincidences and happenstances. Very little of it necessarily planned. So I was a political science major at university here in Washington, D.C. Ended up having to take a year off, not for grade reasons, but some bill reasons, let's put it that way. And ended up in Lake Tahoe and randomly got a job at Caesars. It's not there anymore, but a Caesars Palace at the front desk. I wanted to deal cards, to be clear, but I was only 20 at the time. And so I wasn't old enough to deal cards. So I loved it. It was the first kind of job that I'd had that I really liked going to work every day. And so got back to school, moved over to business, hotel management, and just kind of kept in operations. And it was my dream to be like GM of the Waldorf Astoria was honestly where I kind of saw myself wanting to be. And then was looking at GM roles after while I was finishing up at the Watergate Hotel, independent property here in DC. And got told by a couple of people that, they really wanted a GM with sales experience. And I've done everything in hotels almost except for sales. And a friend of mine from my Hilton days was my rep from a company called TravelClick. And she said, well, we're looking for salespeople and why not give it a shot? And so I did. And turns out I loved that even more. Plus, I didn't have to, this being, the early 2000s, I didn't have to show up at a hotel 6 days a week, 10 hours a day wearing a suit, right? So that alone was enough for me to say, all right, I'll give it a shot. But the plan in the beginning was I was going to go back, right? I was going to go do this and go back to hotels. Well, fell in love with it so much. I very little desire to go back to operations. From that sales role, kind of moved into and expanded into a series of product hybrid type roles within a company called TravelClick that was rapidly expanding at the time. doing things where either the bridge between sales and product, or leading teams that were subject matter experts from the product team to help sellers who had a very broad portfolio. So that's kind of how I moved into the tech side of the business. And in doing so, I sort of realized as I worked through all of the different acronyms in the stack practically that I don't claim to have a unique skill set, but but while there are a lot of people that have much deeper domain expertise than I do in one or two areas, I'm very fortunate that I have a very broad set of experience. So what that helps me do, other than having an amazing network of amazing humans, is in some ways I'm able to see a slightly bigger picture when it comes to a lot of hospitality technology. So long answer to a short question, but that's my story.
Hey, that's great. That's great. So, and that transition, it makes you very unique, right? I think you are underselling yourself in some way. Not many tech startup the people ever spend time operating a hotel, right? So,
Yeah.
um, when you moved over and being in the tech side of hospitality, what are some of the misconceptions that technology people had about running hotels? And after that, a vice versa question: what are some misconception about operational side of hotel people that have a wrong myth about technology?
Right. Well, let me answer this. I will say this. In my not too distant history, I had a senior leader come, say, we need to say that we have amazing people like you and a lot of other people on our team that have deep background in hotels. And, we just say that our products are built by hoteliers for hoteliers. And I said, red flag, stop. Because hoteliers come to this business because you want to take care of people. Honestly, that's, you either love that or you are not a great hotelier, right? And that's a very different skill set than most technology. And so most people that come from hospitality, not all, but most, are, have amazing ideas perhaps to solve specific use cases, things they see every day. But because they're so laser focused on those use cases, they don't always see the big picture. So I actually don't think that the idea that, something is built by hoteliers necessarily makes it great tech. On the flip side, what I think that most people that come from technology don't always understand about hospitality is that, and I think it's just fundamental. And I've had to explain hospitality to folks that come from a wide variety of different industries. That, especially at TravelClick, we did a lot of recruiting from technology and different financial services groups, and so people came in without that baseline understanding of the industry. Is two things. One, I think people often underestimate the complexity of hospitality. People look at a sheet and they go, oh, travel, that's really big. And everybody travels. And I travel, so I know travel. Well, you get down into hotels and you start realizing that there's very specific stakeholder groups and there's owners and managers and brands, and everybody's got, slightly different KPIs and what's important to them. And so that's one thing. And then the other thing, and big tech, I think very often forgets this. And actually, I just read a very interesting piece about Google with their Universal Commerce Protocol, UCP, that they just launched at the Google I/O days a couple of days ago. They're basically putting hospitality on the same rails or in the same bucket as retail. So that's going to be very interesting. We'll see how that works. Is that so much of hospitality is not logical. Look, every hotel, somebody put it this way, it's not an original thought. Every hotel does one thing. They rent used mattresses and toilets for the night. That's what a hotel is in its most basic stripped down form, right? So the difference between a $90 a night limited service property and a $900 a night luxury property is not necessarily $810 worth of stuff. it's $810 worth of perceived value. And that perceived value varies greatly from person to person, right? And I mean, I won't bore you with personal stories that illustrate this, but I think any hotelier will immediately recognize that and think about that. And so tech tries to just put everything into neat, tidy buckets, and hospitality is messy, especially the human side of hospitality, which is the real side of it.
Yeah, yeah. And the perceived value, right? To your point, I think tying to, there are lots of emotional value, right? I think barely anyone will tell us that they go on travel for functional reasons. I just, have to get off my place for a while. And they all want to go and experience something that is beyond the mattress for the night that you quote unquote
I mean,
rented.
yeah. So I will say, Ken, I don't want to start off this conversation disagree with you, but I think there actually are a lot of people that do that. And sometimes I fall into that bucket, right? I mean, I'll be honest, like I have standards. I want more than just a mattress and a toilet, but like, I mean, if I'm traveling and I do a lot of this kind of travel where, I have to speak at an event or something, or I'm going in to meet with a client. So I'm
Mm,
away for one night, right? And I'm probably gonna be I'm going to be on an airplane for longer than I will be awake in a hotel room.
mm,
So my checklist for what I want out of a hotel in a situation like that is a location that's close, a price point that doesn't get me in trouble with my boss, a quiet room where I can get a good night's sleep because unfortunately for someone who travels as much as me, I'm a light sleeper, and preferably, like if there's a loyalty program or it's okay, cool. But like that's it. So I actually divide this. There's
mm.
there's hotels that provide accommodations,
Yeah.
and there's hotels that provide hospitality.
Mm,
And the on the accommodation side, and I know you work with a lot of independent hotels, right? This is where independent hotels can really be special because it's easier when you're an independent hotel to provide that sort of hospitality, not just an accommodation. The brands have kind of, I mean, there's a benefit to standardization. Like I know if I stay at brand X, I get product Y, right? So there's some pluses to that, I suppose. But for independent hotels, it's that opportunity to be hospitable versus just provide an accommodation.
yeah, yeah. But I kind of what we find over the years working with independent is that sometimes people forgot that original reasons of what makes independence unique, right? Especially when you have all these branded properties, competing around you.
Mhm.
People start kind of forgetting the sense that okay, let's just really get into the competition, with the pure price and whatnot, all the mechanicals when the hospitable side, the experience, what makes you unique, the first place start like slipping away. Right.
Mhm.
So which I think there is a human element part of it, and also how technology, when used in the correct way, could help a hotelier be better at delivering that experience. I love how you talk about, the big tech, right? The way they think about products and solving problems. They have to be very logically putting stuff, black and white so that they can actually decide certain things, right? So I think it's really like there's that human element in between of how somebody can take that technology that could be designed scalably for many different use cases or scenarios, use that, apply that, and implement that specifically for a unique experience at an independent hotel, which just from our observations, this is where many times things go wrong.
Mhm.
So I would definitely love to like now pick your brain on because you've been sitting on both sides of the tables, right? Like technology is great, but I think the integration side of it, meaning, when a hotel or when a property start, let's say adopting a new technology, swapping to a new PMS. And I think, now you're at Cloudbeds, you've probably seen, and help many hoteliers, switching to Cloudbeds. What are the biggest, uh, I wouldn't say, for the lack of better term, problems, right? When it comes to integrating and implementing new technology for a hotel.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's a couple of things. I mean, the first thing to think of, especially when you're looking at a system like a PMS, is not to underestimate the complexity of that switch, right? It is it is complicated. And any vendor that says, "Oh, no problem. Don't be cautious, just run." Right? That salesperson is either telling you what they think they want you to hear. Like, you need to be real. There's you're not looking for a seamless transition. You're looking for a partner that can help you manage the inevitable bumps that will come in a transition. That's sort of thing number one, right? Thing number two is that one of the biggest bumps is often around historical data, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about data, I'm sure, as we get into this, and this idea of unified data and and why that suddenly has become absolutely critical, right? But when it comes to importing historical data, yes, the idea that data is the new bacon and bacon makes everything better. But if you have all the bacon, you have all the heart attack, right? And so at some point, data, in other words, if you've spent 20 years with garbage segmentation and all of these kinds of just compounding problems with you, and you try to bring all of that dirty data into a new system, you're actually probably worse off than if you clean fresh start. Right now, we'll bring in the data that you need and the kind of stuff, but I think that's kind of thing number one, right? The other thing that I think is really critical, and this kind of might be a bridge into some other topics, is you mentioned integrations, right? And so what I think we are starting to see, and we'll talk more about this, is integrations have been a pain point for the industry for years, right? But what we're starting to see is people looking more and more for single platforms to do more and more. Now, I'm not saying that all-in-one solution is the right answer for everybody, the majority. Like, that's still an evolving question. But, the idea that every hotelier can manage, 15 different tech vendors is antiquated, has been proven wrong. And in an era where unified data is critical, it's just amplified.
Yeah. And well, before this is the topic I really want to dive in, but before we get to that, let's actually start with some basic stuff too, right? What one thing that struck me when one of our previous conversations is you mentioning the role of a PMS, a property management system, is different in the past versus right now. It used to be a system of records, and now it's becoming more, right? So for a hotelier, right, who's been running a property management system, it's probably like for decades. They never changed it. From their perspective, it's just like, okay, it is a database of reservation data as people coming in and out and all that. We record, making sure that people can check in and check out. I think like I would argue that there's still many hoteliers who think like that is the role of PMS, which we know that perception leaves lots of missed opportunities and revenue on the table if not used right. Right. So why don't we just start with that basics, right? Why would somebody even care about looking at the PMS? Like, it works. Like, why do we have to care about it? Why do we have to change that? And from there, we can kind of extend into the the data problem, right? Which is really like the almost like the gasoline in the new technology era, right?
So look, every hotel in America runs on a PMS pretty much, right? Like, they're pretty standard. But like, think about it. So I started the industry in the late 90s, right? So I'm one of these folks that actually worked in a green screen DOS prompt PMS environment, both in the late 90s and in the mid 2000s, believe it or not. But look, so the PMS concept was built then, and it was to solve one problem: get the front desk off of paper, right? Digitize the calendar, stop putting reservations in a ledger. And it did its job, right? And for 20 years, that was enough, right? But running a hotel in 2026 has very little in common with running a hotel 25 years ago, right? You're managing distribution across 30 channels. You're competing against, OTAs that are spending 20 billion with a B in marketing, right? You're personalizing guest experience across multiple channels, multiple platforms every time of the day, right? So what hoteliers did, this is the thing, they bought tools, more tools. Like, and we can talk about the fact that PMS is more CapEx. And so that was a whole thing in of itself, right? But hoteliers bought a revenue management tool, a guest messaging tool, a reputation tool, an email tool, a website builder, right? 10 different tabs open before noon, 10 vendors, 10 invoices, 10 support teams, 10 passwords, right? But more importantly, 10 different versions of the truth about what's happening in your hotel, right? Now, that fragmentation was annoying 10 years ago. It was expensive 5 years ago. But this year, something changed and now it's fatal. So what we think here is that the PMS is history. Now, I don't mean the PMS is bad, and I don't mean the people who built it weren't smart, right? I mean the category solved the 1990s problem, but despite what my 16-year-old thinks from the way she dresses, we're not in the 1990s anymore.
And let that sink in for a moment. And I think that needs to be a wake-up call, because there are many hoteliers nowadays, they still run their business as if like it's back in the 90s, right?
Mhm.
So and to your point, over time there are technology advancements, property owners or hoteliers, they buy more solutions because there was never a time that, PMS is probably like, in the entire tech segment that's not moving arguably as fast as like many other segments, right? So, lots of the solution is still kind of stuck in the past, being that system of history, right? So, any examples for what hoteliers might be missing? Like, there's opportunities where when they use the PMS the right way, the modern way, that can actually put more money to their pocket.
Yeah. So I mean, look, I think what's important before we get into the specific use
Yeah.
cases to understand sort of what changed and why it
Mhm.
changed, right? And look, let's be really clear. Right now, it's pirate season. And what do I mean by that, right? I mean that there's gold on the water because of AI, right? And there's a lot of vendors out there that, like, everybody's got a boat with a skull and crossbones flag, right? But some people have real ships and other people's are just dinghies with a piece of cloth, right? And so hoteliers need to figure out which one is which, right? Because here's what changed. Here's where the difference is. Every major technology innovation of the last 20 some odd years rewarded scale, right? So let's look at this. The internet, right? You wanted all the rooms, so the OTAs won. You could go to one place, get all your rooms. Mobile, you wanted the smoothest experience. Airbnb won. Everything moved to the cloud, right? So the brands quickly got, there's the things, got stuff in the cloud, and independent hoteliers kind of started to figure things out. But here's what: AI doesn't reward scale. AI rewards context. And context lives with properties. Context lives with operators, not the brands, not the OTAs. They don't know what happens at a property once the guest checks in, right? Like, you could say, oh, Marriott or Hilton, the big brands do. They really don't, right? The data, maybe they do, but the data's in some other system somewhere, right? The property knows. So what's interesting is that with this technological revolution, right? I believe, first of all, there's been no better time to be an independent hotelier than today, right? That's point number one. And point number two is that those independent hoteliers have the power because they have the context. And so I apologize. Look, we made it 15, 20 minutes before we used the term AI, but you knew it was coming, right?
Yep.
So anyway, so that's, I think, the important thing. And what that means is that hoteliers that have their data in one place, more unified data, more context, right, are really going to be able to leverage this new technology, AI, in ways that hoteliers that have disparate data across all of these different systems can't. So the hotelier might think, well, I don't have all of these tools, but I'm not competitive. But it's not the number of tools; it's the amount of data.
Yeah. And for our listeners out there who haven't heard the concept of context, right? Just a quick explanation, right? Think about it's a way of how AI can really personalize research to you, right? So if I talk to ChatGPT or Claude today, right? Hey, I need some restaurant recommendation, right? Because AI knows about me as a person and my history, because I've been talking to these, AI tooling for a while. They know, I live in Hawaii. I have my companies here, my family's here. I have a 6-year-old daughter, right? The recommendations is so personalized to me with my situation, having a young family. If I want to go out to eat, it's gonna recommend things that are more like kid friendly versus like a speakeasy bar, because I can bring my 6-year-old to a speakeasy bar, right? So these all personalization are all based on context, which is
Mhm.
the data that you hotelier has. And what Josh is alluding to is that when you have a property management system that are properly managed and with data structure, what he understands is like, imagine AI knows the pattern of the kind of guests that are coming through your door, the kind, how long they stay. Are they staying as couple, family, or for business travel? They know about you as a property, your amenities, your features, the city that you're in, the kind of events that runs in your city, right? This is the level of personalization that it was very challenging back in the days, right? Josh was talking about when big techs, right? All they built was like the big scalable, right? They need to build this one tech that works in, Hawaii versus Washington, D.C. versus in France. Now, with all this data, hoteliers can really use the data that they already own with the advanced technology evolution with AI to really build some really crazy personalization that make your experience pop.
100%. And what I think, your hoteliers need to understand too, and without turning this into a tech class, but to understand the difference, we'll keep it really simple, between what we call probabilistic AI and deterministic AI, right? So probabilistic AI, basically think of it as a guesses, right? When we think of generative LLMs, like it knows, like your example is perfect, right? It knows about you. It doesn't know everything about you, but it makes guesses. And the more it knows about you, the better those guesses are, right? And if you think about that in the context of not just a concierge, but imagine, like, you stay in a hotel and you're writing a response, and then now you've got AI writing a response to a review or something like that. It knows a little bit more about you, so it can write a better response. But if it gets something wrong, right? It's okay, right? If it recommends a restaurant that, maybe isn't a speakeasy, but isn't perfect for a 6-year-old, like, you kind of figure that out and you move on, right? But when we're and that's cool. That's AI is cool. It can do that, right? But that's not really solving the real problems of hotels, right? That's a nice to have, right? It makes things a little easier, smoother. But that's not like the real revolution, because the real revolution requires deterministic, right? It requires knowing, okay, a reservation is either for 2 nights or 3 nights, not either or. You're either paying 179 a night or you're paying 259 a night, not either or, depending, it has to know what you sometimes refer to as the ground truth, right? And so you can plug in or sprinkle some AI fairy dust with cool chatbot or do some kind of stuff like that. And, it's deterministic, it'll do some cool stuff. But if you want to think about how you use AI in your operational aspects, you need ground truth data, and that only comes from unified data, right?
Mhm.
Because you can't have some of your rate decisioning happening in a revenue management system and some of it happening in a channel manager and some of it, oh, there's that special rate that's only available in the PMS. Like, no, you need one source of truth unified, right? And so I think that's the real context that goes even deeper that hoteliers can take advantage of now.
Yeah. And just to explain that a little bit more, right? So if we remember talking about Josh back in probably like 5 minutes ago, talking about when you have many different technology solutions, right? Lots of the problems that we run into operating hotels nowadays is that like where is the source of truth? Because your PMS might be saying that you have a certain rates for this room for these certain dates, but your revenue management system or your channel manager may have a different source of truth that says completely different things, right? So when you are feeding, let's say you want to use AI to improve the operational aspect to start recommending rates and whatnot, when AI solutions that you have are given two completely different source of truth,
Right.
AI is gonna make the best guess based on the conflicting information. This is gonna be when you start getting really bad results. Versus kind of to Josh's point, when you have one unified data, right? Everything this is one set of data that's not gonna conflict each other. This is the ground truth. Then when you feed this to AI, then AI is gonna give you a lot better success rate when it comes to doing certain tasks. So this is, if we make it simplify, right, that this is kind of the garbage in, garbage out situation. So to make AI really useful, the first step is really about not even using what AI solutions out there, not choosing between Cloud or ChatGPT or whatever, right? You have to really look back at, do you have really clean set of data that any solution that you have could operate on top of it? And this is the part I don't think people have been talking enough about right now, because everyone's chasing the shiny objects, right? Hey, AI is cool, but they are missing the part of like, okay, how are we gonna make sure the data feeding into AI is accurate in the first
Right.
place?
100%. And it's sort of like this idea that, if you really want to effect change in a meaningful way, right? Now, I'm not talking about getting rid of humans, but a lot of people like to talk about, oh, AI is going to let your free your front desk up from doing stuff, right? So that we can, provide the real important hospitality. But let's be real. If all AI is doing is queuing things up for your front desk to approve, that's not actually saving them any time. That's just changing what they do, right? It's kind of like saying, well, I used to write things down in a notebook and now I write things down in Excel. Okay, but then we all ran it, and then everybody just started hating Excel, right? That didn't actually make anybody's lives better, right? It just kind of changed how we worked,
Yep.
right? We're talking about AI. So if you want to actually free up people's time to be more, in other words, you need to start having systems that actually make decisions. Not every decision, there's going to be thresholds, like there's reasonable sort of things here, but you need systems that actually make decisions. And for that, you need deterministic AI, stuff that actually knows the real truth. And so that's the kicker, I think, that a lot of people haven't really fully wrapped their arms around, in the sense that, there's still a lot of people out there going, oh yeah, yep, yeah, it's not gonna replace people, it's gonna, free people up. Okay, but if you go down a level deeper, if it's gonna free people up, how is it gonna do that? It's gonna do that by making decisions for them.
Yep. So if I were a listener listening to this show right now, I'm so convinced how they say, hey, I agree with everything that Keen and Josh have to say.
Mhm.
What should I do now? Like, I think lots of people very confused and overwhelmed with lots of different news and all that the advancement out there, right? But for someone to start making practical actions to really take advantage of the evolution. What's the first thing they do? Like, they have probably a set of technology they're using already. What will be a good way to start doing an assessment on readiness? Like, what can I do like today, tomorrow, the next week to start making positive impact to running the business?
Right. Well, I can tell you the first thing you do is you don't do is just go out and buy a bunch of AI tools so that you can tell your boss, yes, I have AI, right? Like, I mean, it's not a thing, right? And again, at Cloudbeds, we sometimes pride ourselves on being a little bit of rebels. So I'll say out loud what might actually, I'm going to high tech in 3 weeks. So hopefully I say this and I don't have people coming at me with knives. But there's a lot of vendors out there that are just like slapping an AI logo on old machine learning processes, or just trying to make it seem like that what was old is new but with AI, right? And so there's a lot of pirates out there, right? So what I would suggest is that they start thinking about a couple of things. If you're talking to a vendor, right, ask them, I can think of like 5 questions that you should ask every vendor, right? Can your AI take an action on its own, or can it only suggest one? If it only suggest one, that's great, but you know you're buying a smarter notebook, not an employee, right? With that platform. Ask them, where does the data live? Not where does it sync, but where does it live, right? If it creates a data silo, right, that's less valuable, even if it has 10 more features than another platform where the data lives with all your other data, right? Ask a vendor to show you a customer that looks at least somewhat like them, where their platform improved their P&L. Not a guest satisfaction score, not a P&L. That's a difference maker, right? What does it know? What does that platform know about a guest after they come into the hotel? Because before is easy, right? We've got the before. There's a million ways you can know about guests before they walk in your door. The part that matters is after they walk in the door, right? And lastly, is this vendor is trying to help run the hotel they have better, or to help them build the hotel that they're becoming, right? So those are 5 questions to ask. But look, we said this earlier. Switching systems isn't easy. People have contracts, the different things, right? And I'm not suggesting that you can take a 15, 20 vendor tech stack and then just go find a single vendor that's going to do everything you need, right? Like that's not a realistic thing. So, hotels need to start thinking about taking an honest look at their tech stack, counting the systems, counting the cost. Where can they start to consolidate? What can they consolidate this year? What can they consolidate next year? What vendor is moving towards not just a platform held together by integrations, but an actual platform with a single data model, right? So, if that vendor, okay, let's just take an example. Everybody knows I work for Cloudbeds, so this isn't like a secret, right? We have guest experience, right? Guest experience is guest messaging, all of that before, during, after, that side of things. If you can bring that in to the data model, a single data model, that's a huge win. Even if guest experience doesn't do every single feature that another system does. Or if you're going to work with another vendor, find a vendor that's dedicated to building integrations that share all of that data, right? At the end of the day, PMS is history, but it's also that interaction layer that's there. So that's not going to change, right? A guest experience platform isn't going to suddenly start checking guests out and processing payments and printing invoices, right? So if they're not going to have that data, which they're not, right? Are they going to share their data back with the system that's doing that? And so that's a real example of like a question to ask.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it is a big shift on thinking about technology and procurement, right? Because I think the past 10, 20 years, when people, when hotel owners and hoteliers are getting pitched with all these different technology solutions, right? The tipping point is always like the number of features, right? Solution A has like these features, solution B has all those other fancy features, right? So with now the current evolution of AI, the creation and development of new features are becoming so cheap. Like it just like, everybody can even FICO some like really easy features like overnight, right? So that's
Right.
becoming not that fancy anymore.
Mhm.
And which to Josh's point, I think really the treasure, right? The gold mine is really about like the data and back to the integration, right? There's now opportunity to consolidate, to kind of building that one unified source of truth, because like any other fancy features which can so easily be built nowadays needs to act on this one unified data. Like this is like your new currency, not about features. It's just really about like protecting the integrity of that unified data. And once you have that, like there's just so more possibilities and potential that you can do with it. And this is like which to one of the questions that you mentioned, right? Where the data lives, because you gotta make sure that you as the business owner has the authority, the ownership of that data, because then now that becomes your currency in this AI era. Like this is the part where like any other tuning is gonna be operate on top of that, and that belongs to you. No one can take it away if you treat it the right way.
Well, Ken, I mean, I just thought of another sort of real life example, right? So to
Mm.
expand on it, so you're in Hawaii, and so
Yep.
I imagine you have, hotels you work with in Hawaii, and by virtue of geography, a hotel in Hawaii is probably talking to guests anywhere from 3 hours to 8 hours worth of time zone away,
Yep.
right? If you're talking to someone on the mainland of the US, you're probably talking to them via text or something like that. Or if you're talking to a guest coming from Asia, perhaps it's on WeChat or if they're Korean, Kakao, right? I think,
Yep.
or Line.
Line.
Line is Japan. And so you've got these different things, and so you can go in and you can find a guest messaging tool that can answer, right? That can do these things. And you're like, very cool. Now, when it's 3 in the morning for me and the guest is already awake, I've got this AI that can answer. But what if that guest now asks a question, asks not just a question, like, where is the best luau near the hotel, but says, can you do something for me? Or it says, when is check-in? Well, check-in is at 3 o'clock. Well, can I get an early check-in? Can you, like, this is like, if all that system can do is say, well, I need to check, or you need to call back, or you need to send an email. Well, okay, now okay, cool. What did you really do? You didn't really do anything, right? That's not an employee, that's a notebook, right?
Yep.
It's easier, but the real revolution is when that messaging system can look at the check-ins and can say, okay, this guest is checking in on Friday. On Thursday, we're running 60% occupancy. So yes, I can tell the guest coming in on Friday that there's a good chance that they can get an early check-in. Oh, but wait, they're in an Ocean View Lanai. Okay, well, we only have three of those, and those are all checking out on Friday. So maybe I shouldn't, like, these are the kinds of ground truths that guest experience platform now needs to know if you want that guest experience platform to actually go the extra mile
Yep.
and do that, right? And so that's a real life example of the difference between deterministic and probabilistic and deterministic, and having that true context in one place for that system to access and actually make a decision.
Yes, and actually, I have another real examples to back it up. So some of the hotels in the portfolio, they kind of being the more early adopter, right? Start trying out all these phone agentic AI, right? So you might realize sometimes when you start like making a phone call to the hotel, it is actually an AI answering all those like common questions. So lots of those solutions right now, because they are siloed, they're not directly integrated with the PMS, right? So like you can ask all these AI questions about like amenities and things and whatnot. When you trying to ask the AI to actually make some changes, or if you want to do like, let's say early check-in, late check-out, change your room types, things like that, like the AI couldn't do that for you because that is not integrated to where the reservation data is lived right in the
Yeah,
PMS, versus kind
100%.
of the world that Josh is painting the picture about, right? If it is a solution, right? I don't know if Cloudbeds has that already, or maybe some other solution that integrated to it, that like the AI system can actually make changes to the reservation system, so that when somebody call in and say, hey, they have all these, requests and changes, or even upsell, right? Hey, I want to request a late checkout that will cost, them, 40, 50 more, bucks more. But the guest is willing to pay it on the spot. And if the AI now has the capabilities and with the right data to make that action, now it
Right.
becomes a an auto an AI employee, because I actually make changes, not just suggestion, make on the fly without rerouting to this the human staff team. Then like this is the golden path that I don't see huge adoption, or any like major case studies for that use case right now. But I think that should be the golden path that people, hotels and tech companies really need to move to, right? Because this is the key unlock of new revenue opportunities, and to giving the time back to the human staff team, who can actually do a better job on site with the guests coming through the front desk.
Right. And listen, I want to be really clear. I don't want to discourage people from experimenting with things. I don't want people to feel like, oh my gosh, this is so much. I'm just going to do nothing because doing anything seems easier. And you're telling me, well, if I do these little things, it doesn't really like there is some value. We just need to be really clear. Like, let's just take this example, right? You could have said, well, maybe 10 years ago, you would have had two people on the overnight staff. So if somebody, came in, called in or whatever, like a person could answer them and walk them through. But let's be real, right? Like, post COVID, post all of these things, like the last, especially the last 6 years, it's been a meat grinder, right? So those people aren't there anymore. So all we're doing is if we turn on those sorts of things, we're easing the pressure off just a little bit, right? You're giving the guest a little bit more, but it's what they would have had before, right? So this isn't like a dramatic, massive change. This is just it's incrementally better, right? And so, is there some value to that? Yes, right. It had, but it's not the revolution. It's not the fundamental change. It's not giving a guest, if you do that with a guest, and the guest can be like, oh, okay, cool. Like, and like, what's next? Like, okay, like, that's not going to excite them, right? And so, I just keeping those expectations in check that, while not discouraging people from experimenting. One of the things that I tell hotels, I've been saying a lot this year, is that, and I hear this often. Well, Josh, I'm hearing all of this stuff about agentic booking, right? And like that the agents are just going to book more. So do I need to go buy an agentic booking engine or like, what's this? MCP? I don't know. I heard about this somewhere, right? And so what I tell people is, look, the successful hotel in 2026 is not going to be the hotel that has an MCP, an agentic booking engine, and all of this. Like no, but the successful hotel in 2027 might, right? This is all unfolding. And that's the other thing. We talk a lot about MCP, but Google just unveiled in the last couple of days universal commerce protocol. I mentioned this at the beginning, right? Where they put travel into the same rails or the same bucket as retail. So we're going to see how that plays out, right? So, it's important that hotels are staying on top of some of these things a little bit. But what is absolutely critical is that unified data. You're starting to make those steps to clean your systems so that whenever all of that noise kind of filters out, right? And we kind of move through this, that you have the context. Because I can't tell a hotelier that a chat GPT plugin is going to be more or less successful than Google running UCP through AXY. I don't know, I'm just making this stuff up at this point, right? But I don't know but what I can tell you beyond with 100% confidence is that no matter what acronym or platform or whatever is the eventual winner, or who's the next Expedia booking, or maybe Expedia will be the next Expedia, I don't know, but that hotels need to prepare for it the same way, cleaning up their data, having unified data, having that single source of ground truth. That's the critical thing. So start the movement towards that. Start preparing for that. And as a hotel, especially as an independent hotel, where you have that flexibility to make those kinds of decisions, you will be well prepared for 27 and beyond if you start making those changes and thinking about those changes to be made over the next 6, 12, 18 months.
Yeah, and I think it's those hidden work that people are not talking enough about, right? So I think the key takeaway from today is that no, you're not going to be going out and trying to buy 7 other AI solutions tomorrow, but instead, I start looking back at what you already have and do an audit to attack. We had a past episode with a hotel consultant, Dan Waxman, based in Honolulu. Shout out to Dan. Actually mentioned about look at start doing a tech audit. Like before long, you will find out a bunch of features and overlaps and things that you never used. Start
Mhm.
taking that approach, start consolidating that, start building a more unified landscape of your data. Because if you do that right now, next year when better solutions, better AI stuff coming around, right, you are going to be more prepared to ride that wave than now trying to buy 7 other solution and you have to do it again, right? I think recently one of the major brand, I think it's Hyatt, announcing, now they're building all these new AI workflows on top of their data. People are all having discussion and conversation about that AI move. What they did not notice, the corporation spent the last few years just fixing up their data, fixing up their infrastructure to a point that they can start trying now with AI solutions for their operational improvement. So like these honestly years of work for a much bigger scale. If you are not
Mhm.
doing that today, you're never gonna be successful, even you buy 7 other tools, right? So that's definitely something that anyone can take actions on today, tomorrow. So
100%. And Kid, I mean, you just said it again, scale, right? So, first of all, Dan and Sasato, great work. They, those guys do really fabulous work. But you just said it right. Hyatt has to think about that at scale. Couple thousand plus properties, all of these different owners, all of these different things. They can't make a change without worrying. It's like a Jenga block, right? It's like, so when they can't just swipe it clean and rebuild. You're an independent hotel or a small group of hotels. Maybe you don't have as many resources, and that's when you bring in somebody like a Dan or yourself, right, to kind of help you work through some of these things. But you don't need this is not about scale. In some cases, scale can actually make the challenge bigger and harder, right? Context matters. And so independent hotels can leverage their lack of scale, and so that's huge.
yep, thanks, Josh. And I do have the last question for you.
Yeah.
Um, we talked about OTA a while back, right? OTA definitely won big time back in the internet age. And I know Cloudbeds a while back launched a research report about now independent hotels, right? OTA shares of booking take up to over 60%. It's always kind of that frenemy, necessary evil situation with independence, right? So with everything that's changing in terms of technology, do you see a way that that landscape, with the OTA dynamics going to change? What should hoteliers start thinking about? Is that going to be still a heavy reliance situation? Is there going to be opportunities where they could do something else? What's your take?
Yeah. So what's interesting, so there's two things. So one of the reasons that OTAs did so well was they were able to own the discovery phase. So let's say that whether you were just traveling for a quick business trip or whether you were traveling for the family trip of a lifetime, maybe it's somebody coming into, Oahu for a single meeting, or somebody, taking their grandparents and their kids to, like, an amaze for the their grandparent for the, 50th wedding anniversary, right? The discovery process, right, was really hard. You would, tons of travel agents. OTAs made it really easy to take all of those, say, okay, I want to go to Hawaii. I want to look for sort of, give it some parameters, and I could find some things, right? So that made the discovery process a lot smoother, right? That surface. People use the word surface a lot now, right? So the discover, and OTAs also made the transactional surface, the commerce surface, really smooth. So you could very smoothly go from discovery to transaction within the same platform, right? Now, here's the question. Is and will LLMs, whether it's, ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or whoever it is, that's rapidly becoming the discovery surface or layer of choice. But choice for who? For geeks like you and me that live online and feel very comfortable with technology, right? We can go in and find, I can tell it knows about me, and so it gives me three options. Well, are those the right three options? Are we really sure? Where's the FOMO, right? How's that going to play out, right? And chat is not necessarily the greatest surface or interface for commerce, right? Again, we're selling, it can give you a lyrical description, but for years we said people don't read, right? Because, like, nobody takes the time to read anymore. So, like, that was where Airbnb and their app experience was great, or like instant, like those kinds of things. So, like, and what about upselling, right? Like, there's all, like, like, I'm coming to Hawaii, like, I want to understand if that room, can I smell the ocean air? If I pay a little bit more, can I see the ocean, right? Like, how does all of that work? And does that work in a chat interface? So there's a really big question. And here's the thing. You ask me a question and I'm saying, I actually don't know the answer. And I would argue that anybody who tells you they know the answer is either trying to sell you something or full of stuff, right? Because nobody knows. It's all in flux. We are in that moment. It's pirate season, Ken. You don't know which way you go and who's coming, and, like, are they gonna come? Are they coming to help you out? Or are they coming to, like, kill the crew and, take the gold? I don't know. So yeah. So that's just as honest as I can be, Ken. That, like, will the OTAs be around in 5 years, 10 years? We'll see. So, but whatever it is, you're going to want unified data. I'm going to come back to that same point.
Yep.
Unified data doesn't matter if it's an OTA or an LLM or if it's an agent talking to another agent. You're going to need unified data. So focus on is my best advice.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Josh. Where can people learn more about you and Cloudbeds?
Well, Cloudbeds is cloudbeds.com. You can also look us up on LinkedIn. You can look me up on LinkedIn. My contact info is there, or josh.graham@cloudbeds.com. So there you go.
Awesome, Josh. Thank you very much for joining us today. It was a super fun session. So thanks a lot for your time.
My pleasure, Ken. We'll see you around.
All right, see you around. Signing out.
Thanks for listening to the Lights On podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.